Welcome to another edition of HorseCenter, everyone. I am Brian Zipsy, and as always, I have the terrific pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast. That's Matt Schiffman. How are you today, Matt?
I'm great, Brian. We are rocking and rolling on the Derby trail these past few weekends.
Absolutely, Matt. We had a couple preps down in the Big Easy and down in the land of enchantment last weekend. Let's get right to it. We'll start with the Louisiana Derby, Matt. I tell you what, at the 8th pole, I thought it was a 2-horse race between Lone Sailor and my boy Jack. Boy, was I wrong.
Yeah, Brian, it was certainly an interesting stretch run because I agree with you. Coming down the stretch at around the 16th pole or so, it looked like Noble Indy was done after chasing a really hot pace in the race where they went 111 for 6 furlongs.
Yeah, Todd Pletcher trains Noble Indy, 3 for 4 lifetime, Matt. He's owned in partnership by WinStar Farm. I think we've said that, a few times on this Kentucky Derby Trail. Suffices to say, WinStar and Mr. Pletcher are loaded for the Derby, but this was an extremely game effort for Noble Indy. Son of Take Charge Indy, a move forward performance off a decent 3rd place in the Risen Star. Matt, I want to ask you this question. Is Noble Indy a serious Kentucky Derby contender in your eyes?
I tell you, Brian, I think he's not getting enough respect for his victory in the Louisiana Derby. I think a lot of people were a little bit more impressed with the closers in there. But like I said earlier on, he was running fast at the beginning of the race, and everybody else that was running early in there collapsed. He kept going, got passed by one or two of the closers, and came back to win. I think it's a race that he could move the head on, and was a really strong effort. Am I convinced that he's going to get 10 furlongs? Maybe not, but I think he's really due a lot of credit for that performance.
Yeah, it was a strong game performance for sure. And he certainly looked mid-stretch to be a horse about to finish 3rd. So nice performance, Noble Indy. I'll answer my own question. I don't think he's going to win the Kentucky Derby off this. 10 furlongs, and I think there are some better horses out there. But I agree with you for the most part. Noble Indy proved that he's a horse of quality with this race. It was that good a race for him. I want to mention the 2nd place horse. He was my long shot going into the race, Lone Sailor. And he ran a very good race. He probably got his nose in front of Noble Indy and couldn't sustain that. But one reason I really do want to mention him is because he's owned by GMB Racing, Matt. And, of course, the head of that, the patriarch of that, is Tom Benson. Tom Benson, folks, if you don't know, is the owner of both the New Orleans Saints, the New Orleans Pelicans, 88-year-old man. You've probably seen him dance on the football field when the Saints won the Super Bowl. He was lost last week, and I believe the funeral was the day before the Louisiana Derby. It would have been a nice story if Lone Sailor had got the win like he almost did in the Louisiana Derby. But Tom Benson, great owner, great sportsman, supporter of horse racing, and kind of a real figure in New Orleans, was lost this weekend. So he will be missed. And then, Matt, I want to talk about the 3rd place horse because I thought the performance moving forward out of this race came from my boy Jack, because not only was he wide spinning out of the turn, he was just really wide the entire far turn. He lost a ton of ground, Matt. Having seen what I saw as far as lost ground on that turn for this horse, I'm not shocked that he hung a little bit late. He was still running late, but he certainly hung a little bit. I think my boy Jack becomes an interesting horse if he gets into the Kentucky Derby.
I agree with you, Brian. And my boy Jack came into the race with question marks, having one on the turf and then one on that super wet track at Oaklawn Park. He answered those questions really nicely, performing very well on the dry dirt track at Fairgrounds, and I agree, Brian. He had a perfect setup, but wow, was he wide spinning around that final turn and made a very nice move in there. And that's the kind of scenario that horses face in the Kentucky Derby in that big field. So I liked what I saw from my boy Jack. He's a horse that I think I like going ahead, but as you said, he's got 32 points, and that kind of looks like it might be right on the bubble. His connections say they're going to watch what is going on with the points, and I guess if they need to, they might run him again to try and get enough points to get in. So touch and go with my boy Jack.
Well, I like that, Matt. I like that they're willing to run another race. I think he's a horse who should be in the Kentucky Derby. He would be in my top half of the Kentucky Derby picks right now if he gets into the Kentucky Derby. And he really didn't have any answers to question on his form. The only questions he had to answer was the surface and could he take that good turf form and that good slop form at Oaklawn Park to a fast dirt track. He did, because he ran 7-8 lengths farther than the winner, all that lost ground. He ran farther than 1.8 miles, so maybe 1.25 miles won't be as big a jump up for him. Of course, I'm kidding a little bit, but yeah, my boy Jack is an interesting horse, and I think he will get the chance, because usually that's enough points to get you in, and if it's not this year, I think they will pull the trigger on the Lexington, and that's how everybody used to do it back in the day, Matt. 2 weeks before the Derby, yeah, you run your horse. So my boy Jack continues to be an interesting horse in my eyes, but props to Noble Indy. Matt, let's take it out to New Mexico way, and I want to ask you a question. Who is Rose's Desert?
Who is Rose's Desert? Brian, you're going to have to tell me that.
Okay, I didn't know the answer to this question earlier either, Matt, so don't feel bad. What if I told you she was a stakes winner who ran 15 times, won 10, and was second 5 times? 15 times, first or second, every time in her career. 2/3 of those were wins. The stakes came in New Mexico, Matt. She never left the state of New Mexico in all 15 races. She was running in state-bred stakes sprint races in New Mexico, Zia Park and Sunland Park. She was really good for the team of trainer Todd Fincher and owner breeder Joe Peacock. Fast forward 5 years later, she's got Runaway Ghost. They sent this nice sprinting new Mexican mare to Ghost Zapper. They paid big money to go to Ghost Zapper, and the result is Runaway Ghost, Matt. Always talented. We saw some flashes of talent from this horse before, but then he didn't get it done in a couple races. In the Sunland Derby, he did get it done.
Certainly did. Hey, I liked him in there, Brian. And what an impressive performance there. Home track advantage. And he just handily defeated that field in the Sunland Derby to get 50 points in a spot in Kentucky.
Yeah, and he's a horse, I think, again, that I'm considering a little bit for the Kentucky Derby, Matt. I'll tell you why. Now, you say home court advantage, that's true, but unlike his broodmare, he did run several times in California, so he's not strictly a New Mexico horse. The Sunland Derby is in altitude. There's some thin air there, and that might have something to do with horses coming out of the Sunland Derby, firing line, mind that bird, and running well in Kentucky. It gives them a little bit of extra oxygen for that 1.25 miles of the Kentucky Derby. And this was really impressive, because the one thing I really didn't like about this horse moving forward, all of his races, he was on or pressed leads, often fast leads, and he looked like the type of horse that just wasn't going to stick around when there was a strong pace or more or longer distances. Now, all of a sudden in the Sunland Derby, they did the right thing. There was a strong pace. He sat off it. He was back in 5th, 6th early, and then a turn of foot on the turn was very impressive. So Runaway Ghost is a horse to watch, Matt.
Certainly is, and one of those cool stories that you like to hear about in horse racing.
Absolutely. Joe Peacock bred and owned the mare. Todd Fincher trained the mare. Nice New Mexico mare. And now they have Runaway Ghost. Again, Joe Peacock owned and bred, and Todd Fincher. So Pletcher won't be the only Todd at this year's Kentucky Derby, Matt. Good news. One last race I think we need to talk about. I'm worried. I'm a little worried, Matt. We're 3 months into the year, and I'm worried that the female sprint division, there was no true female sprint champion last year. All apologies to the mare Unique Bella who got the award, but there was no true champion last year. It was just a muddled, mixed up division. I'm worried that 3 months in, it's becoming a one-woman show this year because Selcourt is 3 for 3. She's only getting better, Matt, and this Santa Monica was a bomb.
It sure was. And like you said, last year, the female sprinters, every race, there was a different winner and nobody distinguishing themselves. But, hey, this Selcourt, what a performance in the Santa Monica. Paradise Woods was in there, everybody likes Paradise Woods, but that distance, the sprint distance, is probably not her best kind of race. And when Selcourt went after her and took the lead, Paradise Woods had enough, and Selcourt just absolutely destroyed that field. And she is one impressive sprinter right now.
You took the words out of my mouth, Matt, on a couple points there. First off, Selcourt is a monster. She was a talented 3-year-old, very lightly raced last year for trainer John Sadler, but the daughter of Tis Wonderful has put it all together here at 4. This was her best race yet. She's already won 3 stakes, as I mentioned, in 2018. And if there's a better filly and mare sprinter in the country, I sure don't know of her right now. As for Paradise Woods, I still do like Paradise Woods. I think she's a very talented mare. And yeah, I think the key with her is, despite all her speed, she's just a better mare going 2 turns, letting her control the race early and seeing how far she can take them. Remember, she ran a very good race in the Breeders' Cup Distaff last year. So Paradise Woods chasing Selcourt, especially that second half mile, was so quick. It just wasn't going to work out for her. And Selcourt just kicked clear. Sky Diamond's another talented horse in the race. They had no answers for Selcourt. She's the best filly and mare sprinter in the country right now. And Matt, a little bit of sad news, of course, from the recaps of this past weekend. The Good Samaritan rolled by to win the New Orleans Handicap in his first start of the year. But of course, the other horse they were betting in the race, and one of personally my favorite horses in training, Buff Bradley trains the Player. The Player's a really nice horse, nice runner. I've gotten to know him a little bit over the years, and he had a very bad injury, suffered on the far turn in the New Orleans Handicap on the lead. We were worried that the Player wasn't going to survive even minutes after the race. But the severity of the sesamoid injury, they were able to at least get him into surgery. That happened yesterday, Monday at LSU, and the surgery went well, thankfully, Matt. So at least the Player is doing well so far and has a fighting chance.
Yeah, 7+ hours of surgery, lots of screws and a plate in there, but I think the Player is being a good patient so far, and from what I read, he was able to walk back into his stall after the surgery, which is just amazing to think about the strides that the veterinarians have made over the years in treating injuries like that. That after 7 hours of surgery, they're able to bear weight on the injured foot, which is very important for the horses and their anatomy and physiology. They need to be standing so that they have the best chance of limiting complications coming along. So far so good for the Player. We're all sending our best wishes. Hopefully there is no infection or laminitis coming in there, so that he can recover and retire.
Amen, Matt. Continued prayers for the Player. Matt, as good as the Kentucky Derby Prep weekend was last weekend, it gets even better this weekend. We got a couple of big ones, one in the country, one outside the country. Let's start in the good old USA down in South Florida for the Florida Derby, Matt, and it marks the return of Audible. It's been a few months. but we cannot forget the performance that the New York Brit ran in the Holy Bull.
Yeah, Brian, this Florida Derby has an interesting and a strong collection of horses. Some of them who are putting their eggs in this final basket in the Florida Derby to make it to the first Saturday in May. Audible has 10 points. The winner of the Holy Bull, who was so impressive, got 3 wins in a row in there. Catholic Boys coming back off a similar kind of layoff with only 14 points. The Remsen winner came back to finish second in the Sam F. Davis. So the two of them, they need to get a first or a second place finish in here if they're going to advance in the race. We got Strike Power in the race, the speedy Strike Power, who ran a very game second place in the Fountain of Youth. And the winner of the Fountain Youth, Promises Fulfilled, who's already got enough points to be in the Derby. He's coming back in the Fountain of Youth also.
Right, Matt. And that Holy Bull, getting back to the Holy Bull, Matt, I think it was one of the performances of the division so far this year. And one of the things I was so impressed with, Audible really didn't face much. He was facing New York Bred Company up in New York before the Holy Bull, but I just love the way he really sprinted down the stretch. He was running fast at the end of that Holy Bull, and it makes me think that he is, at least to some extent, the real deal. And following that train of thought, I think he's the horse to beat here in the Florida Derby. You mentioned several other ones, and it is an interesting race. It'll be a nice field. I think we have strong candidates for the second, third, and fourth choice in the ones you mentioned. Catholic Boy, nothing wrong with his Sam F. Davis. He didn't get the win as the favorite that day, but Flame Away has proven, I guess, time and time again, that Flame Away is a nice horse. So maybe that Sam F. Davis by Catholic Boy looks a little bit better than it did immediately after the race. And he continues to train well down in Florida. And Promises Fulfilled and Strike Power, interesting. There will be speed in here, and there will be more speed in here. So it'll be interesting to see if they can ration out that speed. Always dangerous at Gulfstream Park. Promises Fulfilled, like the others mentioned, that was his first race of the year in the Fountain of Youth, and very impressive. And Strike Power was stretching out for the first time, so could have improvement there. And he kind of let Promises Fulfilled do his thing and chased him all the way. So all 4 of those alone make the Florida Derby a strong race. But I want to see that Holy Bull performance again. And if Audible can do that, he comes into Kentucky as one of the favorites.
Yeah, looking at the field, it seems like there's going to be a good pace setup for Audible and Catholic Boy. There isn't any reason to think that Promises Fulfilled and Strike Power aren't going to go out there again and try and duplicate their finish from the Fountain of Youth, which to me means that Audibles should be sitting not far behind, and Catholic Boy closing also. But like you said, Brian, this is Gulfstream Park, and on any given day, it can be very hard to run down the speed.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It makes it a very interesting Florida Derby, Matt. The Florida Derby is always interesting. Last year, of course, it produced the Kentucky Derby winner and Always Dreaming, trained by Todd Pletcher. Matt, who trains Audible?
I think it's the Toddster also.
Todd Pletcher, that name. If it's not Pletcher and Baffert, it's not a Kentucky Derby prep, I guess. So that's the big prep. Saturday in America, the Florida Derby, Audible against a good field. Again, making his first start since early this year in an impressive win in the Holy. Matt, the UAE Derby has yet to produce a Kentucky Derby winner. I don't know if it's gonna anytime soon, but at least now it's on dirt the last several years. And I think this year we have, going into the UAE Derby, sometimes we have somebody we like a little bit more coming out of the UAE Derby, but this year going in, I think we have at least two really strong candidates to come to America and be in with a fighting chance at Louisville on May 5. Of course, I'm talking about Mendelssohn and Goldtown.
Yeah, Brian, you and I both have been looking forward to the UAE Derby and looking forward to those particular horses. We were both wowed by the performance of the gelding Gold Town in the UAE 2000 Guineas. Beat a field of 15 or so horses in there and turning for home. He really displayed an impressive turn of foot and surged away from the rest of those runners and was eased up at the end to gallop off to a big victory. So we're looking to see what he can do in there. I think the way he ran that he's got a good shot in the Derby, but we've also been looking forward to seeing Mendelssohn. This is Mendelssohn who won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf in November, and interestingly, people have said it before, that race has kind of turned into a very key race on the Derby Trail, where 4, 5, 6 horses from that race have turned out to run very well on the dirt and do nice things on the Derby Trail. So Mendelssohn has that going for him. He came back, made his debut on the synthetic at Dundalk, and ran a very nice race, a very competitive move down the stretch. Of course, Mendelssohn also has that strong dirt breeding, being a half brother to the great mare Beholder and a half brother to the very impressive sire Into Mischief. So he's won on the turf, he's won on the synthetic, and he's bred for the dirt. Was a $3 million yearling purchase at Keeneland in 2016.
Yeah, Mendelssohn ran a big race, and it's nice to see a horse who you know can ship over to America. Mendelssohn's race in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf, where he beat, as you said, several good horses. Catholic Boy, who we're talking about prominently in the Florida Derby, being one of them. So that Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf showed us that Mendelssohn can ship to America. No surprise, Aidan O'Brien does it a lot, and certainly run a big race, and that was a legitimate big race, beating the horses that he did in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. His return race, as you mentioned, was in Ireland, and it, on the surface, it might not have been too impressive, but I think it did what it needed to do. Mendelssohn was asked to run down the stretch a little bit, and he did, and he was obviously going to be the winner down the stretch. So the brother to Grade 1 winners, Beholder and Into Mischief, Mendelssohn certainly is eligible as a son of Scat Daddy, another versatile sire, is eligible to take to the dirt. Having said that, I think he might be up against it just a little bit in this UAE Derby because clearly the best 3-year-old in Dubai all year has been Gold Town. Gold Town was a turf horse as a 2-year-old, but a gelded son of Street Cry. We know Street Cry is a top sire, also a versatile sire, but we know Street Cry a lot for his dirt ability and passing that on to his progeny, such as Zenyatta. So the distance of the UAE Derby, about 1 mile and 3/16, and the Kentucky Derby should be within Gold Town's realm. And as well as he ran in his last few races, especially the UAE 2000 Guineas, I think Mendelssohn will really have to crank up his game from that return performance in Ireland to beat Gold Town. But it should be very interesting. Now, we should mention Re-Ride because if you're a Runaway Ghost, like Matt and I are a little bit fan, Re-Ride actually turned away Runaway Ghost in the race before the Sunland Derby for Runaway Ghost. I think Runaway Ghost certainly improved quite a bit in the Sunland Derby, but Re-Ride is the horse that really turned him away the race before. So the son of Candy Ride, maybe he presents a threat out of the Steve Asmussen barn.
Yeah, I agree with that completely, Brian. It's the only American in the race, and it's interesting that the Winchell Thoroughbred and Asmussen team decided to not go to Sunland, where he had already run well and maybe a more likely path to get to the Kentucky Derby. They decided to take Re-Ride, who's a son of Candy Ride, over to Dubai. And hey, Brian, he's got a really good record besides talking about beating Runaway Ghost in there, who came back and flattered him. He's 4 for 5, 4 wins in 5 starts. So this is a decent horse. And hey, American dirt form, you always got to assume that it's a little stronger than the dirt form over at Meydan. And I guess the Winchell Asmussen team, they've done okay over in Dubai. They brought over a different Son of Candy ride last year that I think ran pretty good in the Dubai World Cup.
Second last year, Matt. And yeah, we were talking about Baffert and Pletcher, of course, but Asmussen is loaded with good 3-year-olds as well, Reride being one of them. I'll go with Goldtown, though, in this one. While the UAE Derby holds Kentucky Derby implications, Matt, of course, the big race of that the richest card in racing on Saturday at Meydan in Dubai is the Dubai World Cup. In past years, I think we've seen some heavy favorites do what they're supposed to do. I guess we'll have a clear-cut favorite in West Coast this year, Matt, but I don't think he's the only story, and certainly from an American point of view, he's not the only story. So West Coast, the horse to beat on Saturday in the Dubai World Cup, I think he's trying to prove that he is the best dirt horse in the world. He's close to that, but he didn't do it by winning his last couple of races. Now he looks to win one, prove himself as the best dirt horse in the world. But there's a lot of interesting options nipping at his heels in Dubai.
There sure is. This Dubai World Cup is field. I think a field of 10 is likely to be drawn today. Is dominated by the American horses in here and horses, at least horses that also have run in America also. $10 million field. There's a lot of horses in here that have got some big bankrolls behind them. Like you said, West Coast has won over $3 million. And I just want to point out, West Coast has not won a race since the Pennsylvania Derby, and you said it before. It's time for West Coast to win one. And the intriguing story is that we've got the champion mare, Forever Unbridled, $3 million bankroll that she's won, making her final career start, and they decide to do it in the Dubai World Cup. She's a big, strong mare, and I think that physical dominance of hers will make her competitive against the boys in here, Brian. Also in there, we've got Pavel coming back from Doug O'Neill. Seems like a tough spot to make to make a start. He hasn't won a race either since September when he won Smarty Jones. We can kind of say the same thing about Gunnevera, who's in here, won almost $3 million and has been competitive in a lot of big races, but Gunnevera doesn't have a win since August. Fan favorite Mubtahij, who's won almost $5 million. Getting a lot of checks, but he hasn't won a race since September. And another interesting story in there is the Breeders' Cup Turf winner from last year, Talismanic, a star in Europe, won over $3 million, is going to take a try on the dirt in the Dubai World Cup.
Well, Matt, let's talk about a few of those. Yeah, Forever Unbridled is a nice story, and she's a quality mare, and she looks like 1.25 miles might be in her wheelhouse. I'm not sure yet, but I think we'll find out on Saturday, and we'll find out in time for her retirement. Basically, it's her last race, and she's trying to go out with a bang. Wouldn't surprise me, like you, if she did run a big race. Pavel continues in my mind to be a very talented horse who hasn't broken through yet. They put him in a lot of tough spots early, and he's had some bad trips lately. So if he runs big, don't be shocked. And then you got Gunnevera. I think sooner or later, Gunnevera is going to break through and win a big race. 1.25 miles, I tell you, with some pace, maybe this is the spot for Gunnevera. Of course, last time in the Pegasus, he was third best, but the top two were really out there all alone. Gunrunner doing his thing. And then West Coast was the only horse who could really challenge Gunrunner at any point in that race. So West Coast deserves this favoritism. You mentioned Talismanic. I wanted to mention Talismanic too, because what's interesting about him is obviously he's a horse that's developed and gotten better with time. Breeders' Cup Juvenile, the Breeders' Cup Turf was a breakout performance for him. Big, strong. You're talking about big, strong horses. Look at the chest on Talismanic. And you know what's interesting, Matt? For this dirt debut, obviously he can go the distance, but for this dirt debut, look at who's sired this European horse, and you'll see it's Medaglia d'Oro. So there's good reason to believe, and obviously his connections have a pretty strong hope to put him in this race rather than the Dubai World the turf race there, which is pretty rich as well, not quite 10 million. So Talismanic taking to the dirt. It's a tough spot for his first dirt race, but son of Medaglia d'Oro, he could certainly take to it. Very interesting field for the Dubai World Cup. Matt, I am going to say that Pavel runs a big race to run in the money, but I can't look past West Coast as the horse to beat.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to look past West Coast in here. But you know what, Brian? I'm a big fan of Forever Unbridled. I think she's going to give him a run for his money.
Yeah, she might be the second choice in here, Matt. That'll be interesting to see. The mare, she's just run so infrequently lately. It's hard to know, but she's working great. So good luck. That would be a nice story to see Forever Unbridled go off to retirement with a big performance there. Matt, one more thing I wanted to mention, Matt, is everybody knows us from Horse Racing Nation. They know us, especially watching here from HorseCenter. But I did want to mention our new venture. We have something new that me and you are really involved with some friends, and it's a racing partnership called Derby Day Racing, Matt. We are nothing but excited about bringing more people into the sport as owners. And right now we have a 2-year-old partnership that we're hoping to find more investors and hoping to fill. Buff Bradley's going to train the horses. We're looking for 2-year-olds right now this spring to buy. So look for Matt and I with Derby Day Racing a little bit as well.
Yeah, folks, you can go to our website, which is derbydayracing.com, where there is contact information. And if you've ever thought about owning a racehorse, partnerships are the way to go, because for a relatively small amount of money compared to what you would have to spend to buy a horse on your own, you get a chance to get a share of a quality horse that and enjoy the community of several other owners in the experience, along with Brian and I, of course.
Yeah, that should be fun, man. We're looking forward to it. As always, I want to thank you, folks, for watching HorseCenter every week. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel right here at Horse Racing Nation. Also, I want to thank our sponsor, Derby Wars, the best contest site out there. Any more closing shots, parting shots from you today, Matt?
As always, I want to thank everybody for watching the show and stay with us down the Derby Trail. And, of course, I want to thank Brett Workman for producing our show.
Thank you to Brett. Thank you. We'll be back next week talking big stuff here on HorseCenter.
Woo-hoo.